You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Goku. Here again with another reading for you guys. Not too long of a reading tonight. We're going to be tackling The Failure of the Black Greek Letter Organization by Ali D. Chambers. Before we get into this reading, though, I want to remind you guys that this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. There are other shows, other podcasts on this network you are invited to tune into.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-Black perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the Revolutionary Matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. Make sure you guys are tuned in to all of those shows on KWAZ Radio. Make sure to subscribe to their YouTube channels and like their content and interact with it too. Comment on the episodes so that they could, have a discourse with you in the comment section, etc. Right now, we're trying to get the pro-Black perspective, who has 900 subs. Trying to get him to 1,000 subs because at 1,000 subscriptions, allegedly YouTube is supposed to monetize the channel. So we wanna get him across that finish line and see what YouTube does next. All right, so that's the move right now. Let's try to get the pro-Black perspective across 1,000 subscriptions, right? And we appreciate your help in that matter. All right. Failure of the Black Greek Letter Organization. So the abstract reads, between 1906 and 1920, 8 of the most prominent Black Greek letter organizations were established. The creation of the Black fraternity had a dual purpose. First, these organizations were established for the greater purpose of pooling the resources of African Americans in the hopes of acquiring an education. Second, these organizations were formed as an attempt by Black students to gain acceptance into American society. Black Greek-led organizations are some of the most influential organizations in the country. Collectively, these organizations claim approximately 800,000 members, with many coming from the social elite of Black culture. Despite the great influence and vast membership that these organizations possess, the activities of the Black Greek-led organization have included secret meetings, selective membership, and a preference for lighter complexioned members. Moreover, the failure and shortcomings of the Black Greek-led organization have allowed Black elites to create a separate privileged society based on snobbery and arrogance, and have thus enabled these organizations to perpetuate the vicious cycle of racial prejudice and white supremacy. Keywords for this paper are Greek organizations, Black bourgeoisie, Black Greek-led organization, white dominant culture, Eurocentric organizations, African American organizations. So I want to read this paper because it kind of gives you an idea into how we get sold out over and over again, right? Black Greek-led organizations are some of the most influential organizations in the country. Collectively, these organizations claim approximately 800,000 members, with many coming from the social elite of Black culture. Each year, they offer countless scholarships and conduct thousands of service programs. Accordingly, many of the staunchest supporters of Black Greek-led organizations not only insist that their existence is a valuable asset to society, but also stress that these organizations, as well as their members, which include writers, social activists, educators, and civil rights leaders, are historically linked to the success of the African American community. Conversely, many of their harshest critics maintain that the activities of organizations that have included secret meetings, selective membership, and a preference for lighter complexions have allowed Black elites to create a separate privileged society based on snobbery and arrogance, and have thus enabled these organizations to perpetuate a vicious cycle of racial prejudice and white supremacy. So, just a sidebar here, you gotta understand, this is where you get a guy like W.E.B. Du Bois, right? High-colored, snob, right, because of his educational background and his association with these societies, right? The thing I always say is this, though, and what no one likes to hear, apparently, is that a lot of what Du Bois was saying along these lines isn't really wrong, at least in my humble opinion. You do want your talented people at the forefront. You do want your talented people looking to organize the community politically, looking to strengthen up the community through organizing and working towards a nation or working towards power, right? But what you don't want is the this colorist thing going on. What you don't want is this non-transparency, this secret meetings and the snobbery and all that kind of stuff. And that's what we saw from Du Bois. And in fact, Du Bois at one point later on had to admit that the Black Greek letter organizations and stuff failed. And in fact, they failed him in his time of need as well, right? So we want to keep this in mind. This is why I'm reading the paper as well. This is where you hear terms like Boule and stuff thrown around, and it's really referring to folks that we just described in this first paragraph of the reading. To continue. Consequently, it is the conformity to Western values and social norms that has created the controversy surrounding the initial purpose of the Black Greek-led organization. Between 1906 and 1920, 8 of the most prominent Black Greek-led organizations were established. Many scholars have questioned whether these organizations were created in the hopes of unifying the Black community against the harmful effects of racial prejudice, or whether they were formed by young African American students in order to gain acceptance into American society by emulating existing white organizations of the period. In the past 5 years, there has been a resurgence of research surrounding the philosophy and mission of the Black Greek-led organizations, or the BGLOs. New African-centered theories suggest that BGLOs should be critiqued as social movements. Emerging from this research is the work of A.D. Chambers, who suggests the rites of passage of the Black fraternity, which include ancestor veneration, rebirthing concepts, and dance performance, can mirror those characteristics found within traditional Western African communities. Consequently, this new research asserts that despite the many similarities of the BGLO to traditional West African organizations, This resemblance can be viewed as an unintended consequence of deep culture and not a product of direct design. The thing about this West African culture emulation is that the West African culture emulation, from all my readings, has shown that from an early age, everyone understood that they were a part of a community, and that you were, and that I am because you are, right? So that we were all equal. We looked out for the group. No one was above the group, etc. The problems with these secret societies is that they believe that certain folks are above the group, and that's the thing you want to avoid. You want to put your talented people to the front. You want them working on progress for the people, but not to be, put up on this pedestal, or put up or elevated to some higher caste, right? That's not what you want. So that's the thing that these BGLOs lack. To continue, the creation of the Black fraternity had a dual purpose. First, these organizations were established for the greater purpose of pooling the resources of African Americans in the hopes of acquiring an education. Second, these organizations were formed as an attempt by Black students to gain acceptance into American society, that is, the campus community, by emulating or creating organizations that mirrored pre-existing white organizations. I've said this before on the show, and if you have to follow something white, you should already know you're in the wrong. If you got to follow something white, you should already know you're in the wrong. If you're creating an organization that mirrors something going on in white society, you already know you're in the wrong. To continue. From as early as the 1700s, Blacks in America believed that there were conditions placed on them to justify equality or citizenship. These included acceptance of Christianity, participation in the military, obedience to Republican or Democratic principles, and economic development. Taken together, these can be encapsulated as the be like us theory of equality, that Blacks would be equal to whites when they become like whites. Another approach was an attempt to adjust all thought and action to the will of the greater group, assimilation into white culture and society. Third path was a conscious effort at self-realization and agency. Racial uplift was the Black elite's response and challenge to white supremacy. It was both a contradictory position that sought to affirm that African Americans belonged to a racially subordinate caste, while also serving as a model for African Americans aspiring to redefine themselves as members of a higher social class. Social uplift was accompanied by a practical methodology of self-help. Racial uplift was accompanied by a practical methodology of self-help. Self-help sought to refute the view that African Americans were biologically inferior and inassimilable by incorporating the Black community into ostensibly universal but deeply racialized ideological categories of Western progress and civilization. Generally, Black elites claim to possess class distinctions from other African Americans. Moreover, the presence of a better, quote-unquote, a better class of Black people indicated racial progress. They believe that the improvement of African Americans' material and moral conditions through self-help would diminish white racism. Through racial uplift ideology, elite Blacks sought the cooperation of white political and business elites in the pursuit of racial progress. Yeah, you see this idea of proving to whites that you are worthy already indicates if you have to or want to prove to white folks that you are worthy of being viewed as their equal, that you are worthy of being their equal, already you are creating this stratification saying that, listen, we're equal to y'all, right? We are the uplift of the race. We've evolved up to your order, right? The rest of them haven't, but don't worry, we will control the rest of them. This was this was really the rhetoric of folks like W.E.B. Du Bois. Even Garvey too had a little bit of that kind of rhetoric and all. Like we'll go and we'll what's the thing Garvey used to say? We'll go and show the African the way and all this kind of stuff like that. You know, you already kind of putting yourself in this distinct spot, right? To so-called gain the respect of whites. And that's why I've always never liked that terminology, that you know, do this and do that and you'll gain the respect of others. And I don't think it's about respect of others. It's about prosperity and longevity of ourselves in light of the fact that we're at war with these other people. We don't got time to deal with folks who want to be the special Negro. That special Negro shit is what causes us to have these sellouts too. Tommy Sotomayor thinks he's a special Negro. Charleston White thinks he's a special Negro. Tariq Nasheed and them think, and Yvette Carnot, they think they're special Negroes too. Both W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington were proponents of racial uplift. Although both of these individuals invested different levels of support in the theory, they initially validated its position within the black community. In his novel, Up From Slavery, Washington wrote, "The wisest among my race understand that the agitation of questions of social equality is the extremest folly, and that progress in the enjoyment of all the privileges that will come to us must be the result of severe and constant struggle rather than of artificial forcing." In the Philadelphia Negro, Du Bois further elaborated, "Men have a right to demand that the members of a civilized community be civilized, that the fabric of human culture, so laboriously woven, be not wantonly or ignorantly destroyed. Consequently, a nation may rightly demand even of a people it has consciously and intentionally wronged, not indeed complete civilization in 30 or 100 years, but at least every effort and sacrifice possible on their part toward making themselves fit members of the community within a reasonable length of time, that thus they may early become a source of strength and help instead of a national burden." First quarter of the 20th century, Black Greek-led organizations became the vehicle used by the African American community to articulate their concerns and grievances regarding the unfair treatment and second-class status they were forced to endure. When the internal pressures and strains of segregation pushed the black community to its limits, many within the community initiated the creation of new organizations, both formal and informal, whose purpose was to create new measures and tactics to alleviate the strain that had been exerted upon the community. The new tactic of the Black Greek-led organization was seen as both a traditional and unorthodox method of direct action to bring about social change in American society. Black fraternity was traditional because it was already a cultural mainstay found at mostly white colleges and universities. However, in the eyes of many whites, the Black fraternity was also seen as an unorthodox organization for those who had never seen black men organize themselves in such an elaborate manner for the purpose of improvement in their communities. So it goes to show you, right, that if black folks really want to organize, they can organize. It also goes to show that your talented folks can organize, but they choose to organize around being integrationists, assimilationists. it's like they're inside and I shoot the breeze, or Zuliism had a prompt about a black man who was building some college, like a Christian college. And what's interesting with that story is that another black man, I guess a podcaster, was going through the images and looking up the images and finding that the images were stock photos and this, that, and the other. So the indication or the implication given was that it was a scam school, right? And it may very well have been. I don't know if it was, but I know that the information that was put forward as it being a scam school didn't prove it being a scam school. Everyone uses stock photos on websites and whatnot, right? But one of the points that Zuli made that was pertinent is that let's say it is a scam school. The time that you took to build this websites are not cheap. By the time you put together this website and had this put together and had people put testimonials and found all these images and all this, the time you did that, right, is the time you could have been actually building something real for your people. And I see the parallel here in that the time that you guys took to build these integrationist organizations, these assimilationist organizations, right, to look like white folks, right? You could have really been building something, building something to benefit the people at large. And the thing is about it, from what I'm understanding in my readings, is that black folks at the time, right, those who couldn't make it to a college or whatever, they actually supported what you were doing. They supported the formations of these fraternities. All you had to do was make it something that could have started or be the blueprint for organizations that pump out the future leaders, patriotic, Black equals African leaders, those who will build, those who will strive to, those who will eventually build, and those who will maintain organizations, or even to go further, nations, right? The time you spent building this assimilationist bullshit, you could have been building something, right, that really helps the larger community. You know, and that's the parallel I see with that story from the Shoot the Breeze. Don't waste time doing this stupid stuff, right? Use the time wisely to build something that more of us could benefit from. Black Greek-led organizations were patterned after Eurocentric organizations. 1776, Phi Beta Kappa, the first Greek letter fraternity, was established at William and Mary College. It was this organization, which evolved over time to become the standard for excellence in collegiate academics, that spurred the formation of other fraternal organizations. Accordingly, Greek letter fraternities soon became a common sight at many colleges and universities around the nation. Helen Horowitz, author of the book Campus Life, wrote, "The fraternity had great appeal. For those undergraduates with the wealth, inclination, and leisure to join, the new Greek-led organizations gave a new area of privacy away from college eyes. Colleges founded by Protestant denominations that demanded abstinence and self-denial, members could break the official code among trusted brothers. Fraternities provided the economic and social basis for feasts, strong drink, loose talk about women, card playing, and gambling. Over time, as Greek-led organizations became more common, they evolved out of the image of Phi Beta Kappa. Just as white students created Greek-led organizations as a means of securing and maintaining their position of wealth and prosperity, Black students, in an attempt to conform to the standards of white America, also modeled their own Greek-led organizations after many of these existing white organizations. Accordingly, the assimilation of elite African Americans into the white community complicated the issues of class and color consciousness. Furthermore, those African Americans who were members of these organizations internalized racial prejudice and created a hierarchy based upon social Darwinist attitudes. Right? Right? The fittest. Right? So it's hard for me to read this and not think that we're just woefully unserious. We're just woefully unserious. Like, first of all, as a black, especially in 1902 and all this kind of stuff, you're telling me you are a black Greek? You know, more evidence that black folks have lost so badly. Black folks want to be anything but African. Right? Anything but African. Lawrence Graham, author of Our Kind of People, indicated that the elitist African-American fraternal organization known as the Boule was considered an elite men's club by many, and its membership has included the most accomplished, affluent, and influential black men in every city for nearly 100 years. Graham further elaborated on this issue by writing, "The Boule selects its national membership strictly on the basis of professional accomplishments, rather than popularity among a certain local group, conducting all of their official activities and social gatherings in black tie attire with formal ceremonies. Boule members are men who are attracted to the fraternity because of intellectual discussions and its interest in promoting scholarship among a group of black professional men." In the end, Graham contended that although the upper classes of the black community may set themselves apart with their clubs, fraternities, and sororities, while denying membership to the majority of the black community who will never achieve their social standing, they perceive their reasons for forming such exclusive groups as perfectly honorable. In Graham's view, the members of the black elite are creating these exclusionary communities only as a reaction to the force of exclusion they have experienced through white supremacy. So basically, we were shitted on, we're gonna shit on y'all. So man, black folks, man, it's just, let's hunker down somewhere where at least we ain't getting shitted on the most. We will hunker down a little bit under this white supremacy. We gonna get some shit on us, but it ain't gonna be like y'all, the majority of y'all down there. We'll be a little bit shielded under this little bullshit little awning that we created called a Black Greek letter society. And our history is a history. Man, when you talk about a job being done on a people, our history is a history of people doing just that. Trying to find a little shade from the shit. To be clear, our history since the Ma'afa is that. Right? And then this is why we have to have what we call grassroots movements, where the majority of the people, the ones on the bottom with the who are getting shitted on the most, right? This is where your police brutality comes in. This is where your extrajudicial sentencing comes in. Those people who see that the most, this is where the black on black violence, those who have to deal with that, this is where that comes in. All because those people who have the ability to do more, to work more, to organize more, to create more institutions in black society refuse to do it. Refuse to do it. And this is what this white boy does to his own people too, by the way. They talk about this all the time. These white folks are some of the dumbest people, because The majority of them are being shitted on by their elite, affluent, right? But the idea that they are better still, right? Some doped out, buck tooth falling out their head, white boy in Wyoming or West Virginia still thinks he's better than the best black folks that we have out here, right? This is what our black elite is trying to emulate. That they're better, and look at us white folks. Look, we've ascended. Look at the majority of them are still out here wallowing in the streets, killing one another and all that stuff. Instead of you take your talents and your resources and pool it together and start changing some shit. Right? This is what you prefer to do. Sit down, drink, talk some bullshit, and feel better about yourself than everyone else. This is our problem. Since the Ma'afa, this is the problem that we face. But the thing I want people to get from it is that you can organize. You can get organized. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Although these organizations had a specific aim of liberating the black community from inferior positions as second-class citizens, many viewed these organizations as a means for the black bourgeoisie to create and maintain privileged status and recognition within the black community. Noted African-American sociologist E. Franklin Frazier, in his book, Black Bourgeoisie, wrote, although the original aim of the society was to bring together the aristocracy of talent, it has become one of the main expressions of social snobbishness on the part of the black bourgeoisie. In his book, Black Greek 101, Walter Kimbrough documents that in 1948, social activist W.E.B. Du Bois commented on the course and function of the Black Greek letter organization. During a speech delivered at the 19th Grand Boule Conclave of Sigma Pi Phi, Du Bois, who himself was a member of the Boule, declared, quote, what the guiding idea of Sigma Pi Phi was, I have never been able to learn. I believe it was rooted in certain exclusiveness and snobbery, for which we all have a yearning, even if unconfused, end of quote. Moreover, Du Bois felt Boule did not represent the needs and desires of the black community. When Du Bois delivered his speech, almost half of the members of the Boule were physicians, dentists, and pharmacists. The other half consisted of educators, clergy, and social workers. Du Bois was not only critical of the Boule, he also openly condemned other black fraternities. During a 1930 commencement address at Howard University, Du Bois stated, our college man today is, on the average, a man untouched by real culture. He deliberately surrenders to selfish and even silly ideals, swarming into semi-professional athletics and Greek letter societies and affecting to despise scholarship and the hard grind of study and research. The greatest meeting of the Negro college year, like those of the white college year, have become vulgar exhibitions of liquor, extravagance, and fur coats. We have in our colleges a growing mass of stupidity and indifference. This outright objection to the strategies, tactics, and overall mission of the black fraternity was a key concern of many civil rights leaders within the black community, who tried to encourage members of these organizations to distance themselves from aligning their overall mission and goal from that of the white community. However, acceptance in the mainstream American society demanded that many black leaders disregard the criticisms of social activists and adopt the values and social norms of white America. This acceptance of white values also included the acceptance of white prejudice, which also became a part of the social agenda of the black fraternity. While reviewing the history and mission of other prominent social movements of the black community, the issue of skin color and complexion has often played a significant role in the overall function and outcome of the organization's goals aims, and philosophy. As a result of this internal prejudice, many black institutions and social organizations have accepted African Americans with lighter complexions into their ranks with more ease than dark-complexioned African Americans. Additionally, many prominent African American colleges and universities, social organizations such as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, and fraternal organizations preferred the idea of allowing only lighter complexion blacks to join their ranks. Organizations such as the Blue Vein Society, you heard the matron talking about the Blue Vein Society recently. Organizations such as the Blue Vein Society made it quite clear that its members hope to interact only with those who were light enough to pass the series of tests set forth by the organization. So I learned something from the matron last night, and you guys need to tune into the Revolutionary Matron as well. Last night she did an episode called Genotypes and Phenotypes. I suggest, and she kind of gave her testimony and some things that happened in her life. But along the way in that conversation, you know, the matron was talking about like people took milk bath. Like you bathe like a newborn or young baby, you'll bathe them in milk, and I guess try to change their complexion. You'll try to make sure that their hairs aren't too dark. And I know about skin bleaching and stuff from back in my own home country. I knew about the paper bag test when I was a kid, brown paper bag test, but I never knew about stuff like milking and all this blue vein stuff until I came to the States. And it just shows the number that's been done on our folks, man. And let me tell y'all something. If something was prevalent 100 years ago, and we can still talk about it 100 years later, that means that thing is deep running now. That thing is now a part of like the DNA now. It might not be a conscious decision to choose the lighter ones of us over the darker ones of us, but it's still a decision that would be made. And all of that is our people mirroring what these white folks do. Or these white folks take more interest into lighter skinned black people or black folks who could pass or whatever, right? We have to see the oppressor and choose none of his ways. What I look like following the shit white folks put down on black folk? What do I look like doing that? That's the question you have to ask yourself. What do I look like out here basically carrying out paper bag tests? And like, what do I look like doing this type of stuff? This is what every black person needs to ask themselves. Hey, hold on, am I doing shit white folks do? Because it's so ingrained now. We have to start questioning. We have to start deliberately asking ourselves certain questions so that we don't continue the work or continue to grow the plant for which the seed they put in our brains, 100 or 100 plus years ago. I'm going to take a station ID break here. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Blue Vein Society. Right? I'll be back on the other side.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the Revolutionary Matron on KWAZ Radio. Have you ever considered joining KWAZ Radio? Each of our hosts shares their unique perspective with you. You might have a perspective that needs to be shared. If that's true, hit us up at kwaz.radio@gmail.com. What are you gonna do? What you gonna do?
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. Make sure, like I said, we're trying to get the pro-black perspective also on KWAZ Radio. They just crossed 900 subscribers on YouTube. Let's get them to 1,000. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to go over and subscribe to the pro-black perspective. Tell some friends to subscribe. And also check out the content on that channel. Let's get them to 1,000. Let's see what YouTube is going to do with the fact that that channel has the stated number of subscribers as well as the number of hours of watch hours. Right. Once he has those two things. Let's see what YouTube does next, right? So help us to see where it goes from there. And while you're at it, subscribe to the other shows as well. If you or someone you know is interested in hosting a show on KWAZ Radio, again, this is a Pan-Africanist network. So we're looking for topics and voices from all throughout the diaspora. If you or someone you know fits that bill and has that interest, let them email KWAZ Radio, pitch a show idea, and let's go from there. I personally be excited to see some fresh faces on the network, particularly those from other parts of the diaspora, the Caribbean, the continent itself, the UK, etc. Okay, so let's return to this paper. Let's finish this paper now. Admission to the Blue Vein Society required an applicant's skin color to be light enough for the veins in the wrists to be visible. Additionally, the paper bag test was sometimes employed to determine admission to mulatto churches. Under that test, individuals seeking to join a congregation would be required to place their arm inside a brown paper bag and could attend church services only if the skin on the arm were lighter than the color of the bag. And again, this is black folks doing this shit. Charles W. Chestnut, author of The Wife of His Youth, described the process used by the Blue Vein Society and elaborated on the origins of the term blue vein. Some envious outsider made a suggestion that no one was eligible for membership who was not white enough to show blue veins. The suggestion was readily adopted by those who were not of the favored few, and since that time the society, though possessing a longer and more pretentious name, had been known far and wide as the Blue Vein Society, and its members as the Blue Veins. In many cities, mulattoes lived in separate residential communities, formed separate professional and business associations, and denied membership to darker complexion African Americans. So this is why, right here, this is why we gotta cut this miscegenation all the way down. This tendency to want to lay up with these other folks, we gotta cut it down. And if for nothing else, we got to cut it down for this reason right here. Because the products of miscegenation, like Erzuliism said in the chat for the Learning Curve podcast last night, that's the show of genotypes and phenotypes. He said the children always choose, Erzuliism said the children always choose to follow the dominant society. So some of us might be foolish enough to accept the one drop rule and say, well, they're black kids, right? They're black. But the reality is that these kids end up being some of our greatest adversaries. And that's just something we got to be real about. So what ends up happening is, because so many of us look at these kids as black, they're kind of accepted in black society, right? But what happens is they don't get called on this type of shit that they do here, right? Separate professional and business association, right? Denying membership to DACA skinner. They don't get called out properly on this stuff. Obama is an example of that. You accept Obama as a black man when all records show that his history shows that he's white-minded, right? But does nothing for darker skinned Africans in America. Sharpens everyone else's axe. LGBTQ, his Latinx, and all this old shit. And the acceptance by black society first starts with the fact that he has a black wife. See, that's the game. And we don't call them out on this stuff because too many of us view them as black. These differences were reflected in the leadership of the black community at the turn of the century, when mulatto elites dominated the intellectual and political life within the black community. Although the mulatto, I guess the police are coming for me talking about these high-color Negroes here. Although the mulatto elite were generally in a higher socioeconomic class than the black masses, they were nonetheless rejected by the white community because of their African heritage. So now, imagine that individual that you've created now. You've laid up, did some race mixing. Now you've created this individual who follows the dominant society or follows whiteness, but in reality won't be accepted in white society because of the African heritage, the African heritage that they do have. That's the beast that you've created. So you've created this mongrel, if you will, that is always going to be trying to get the acceptance of the dominant society by shitting on black society. But they will never get the complete acceptance from white society. So you know what that means? They'll always shit on black society. They'll always shit on black society. We got to start thinking about these things before we lay up. I always you may not like Gaddafi, but I always like some Gaddafi used to tell, according to Dr. John Henry Clark, Gaddafi used to tell Arabs who were leaving to go to Europe to get education, said if you go out there and you lay up with a white woman, don't bother come back. Because you can't make a strong Arab between the legs of a European woman. And that right there, again, whether you like him or not, that right there alone, I could shake his hand. I could shake his hand. You're gonna have this being. You're gonna create this being who has this inferiority complex to the point he or she has this inferiority complex while having a superiority complex. That's just a mess. That's just a mess. And I'll say something too that never gets said, but those children from those unions, when they reach a certain age, they don't even like their black parent anymore. They tolerate them. But most of the time, they try to hide them in the back somewhere. You know, people asking them, are you the help? No, I'm the father. What are you talking about? You know, shit like that happens. You know, think about what you're doing. Anyway, let's continue. In Black Bourgeoisie, Fraser argued mulattoes, blacks with white progenitors, led a more privileged existence when compared with their pure black counterparts. During slavery, these fair-skinned blacks were at times emancipated by their white fathers, and after slavery, their kinship ties to whites gave them an advantage over other blacks in obtaining education, higher status occupations, and property. You know? And so a lot of black folks look at that, and this is the problem, man. Too many of us don't understand the game. A lot of us who've come along over the decades since this was a prominent way of life, believe that, well, if I could get with a white person and have children, I'm going to give my children a better chance. But a better chance at what? You rubbing shoulders with these white folks ain't going to elevate you no further. And in fact, what it's going to do is distance you from your people even more. You have no say afterwards in your community. And that's what we see. What do we see people say all the time? You can't be laying up white and trying to give advice or be a leader in the black community. Black folks ain't really having that shit. So that means that let's say you're a black man and you've reached a nice little status in life. You can't even help your people. If you wanted to, you couldn't really help them. Because most of them are going to look at what you're doing and say, most sensible black folk are going to look at what you're doing and say, you didn't even prioritize your people in who you married and who you had children with. And as people become a little bit more sensible, you're seeing people push back against that stuff. What's the kid from the show Atlanta, Glover? When he was doing This Is America and all that stuff, people rightfully called him out and said, but you're married to a white woman. Think about what you're doing. Within many Black Greek organizations, it is the psychological outlook and attitudes of the organization's core members that set the precedent for the organization's activities. For instance, if the core members or inner circle of an organization are preoccupied with acquiring an education, consequently the organization and its membership may focus its energies on providing educational opportunities for all of its members. This idea of an organization's philosophy being guided by the attitudes and actions of its core membership is not a foreign concept, as many organizations are fueled by the prevailing attitudes of their core members. Sociologists often refer to the small, self-perpetuating elite that control most organizations as an oligarchy. An oligarchy arises because leaders wish to hold on to their positions of power either for psychological reasons or because the positions provide them with economic rewards and social status that they would otherwise lose were they to return to the ranks of the membership. That's a good point. The inner core of members tend to dominate the organization by consolidating their attitudes and philosophies into a congruent stream of thought whose purpose is to validate the power of the oligarchy. In most situations, when an oligarchy develops, many people are subsequently excluded from leadership because they do not reflect the values, background, or core membership. Therefore, the culture of the organization contains hidden values that create a self-fulfilling prophecy that affects the social position and status of all the individuals involved. The elite have an image and an ideological identity that they project. Hence, those members who wish to gain status, respect, or prominence within the organization must first embrace their ideals if they wish to succeed. Consequently, those individuals whose backgrounds and characteristics are similar to those of the elite are singled out and provided with better access to information and networking, and more prestigious positions. Thus, those who are given opportunities to advance are more committed to the values of the organization. The hidden values of the oligarchy create a self-fulfilling prophecy that can be rooted in either Afrocentric or Eurocentric attitudes. Accordingly, it is the agency of the organization's members that guides its aim and social agenda. Although a black organization can exhibit both African and European cultural characteristics, it is ultimately the oligarchy that creates a philosophy for its members. Therefore, the most critical step in the process of cultural solidarity is the agency or personal orientation of the organization's members. Thus, the cultural orientation of the black organization is determined primarily by the actions of the oligarchy and is then reflected by its subordinate members. Due to the social constraints of society, individuals seeking political, social, or economic advancement may choose to either embrace or deny a relationship with a particular community or culture. This denial or acknowledgement of culture can lead to either dislocation or unification with one's traditional culture. The dilemma that arises within the Black Greek-led organization has to do with the affiliation and direction of its core members. Right? When an organization's oligarchy abandons its traditional culture in pursuit of greater social ranking, the organization loses its focus. It becomes stagnant and no longer resembles its traditional cultural identity. Rather than adhering to their own traditions and cultural attitudes, many members of Black Greek organizations, particularly those at colleges and universities, have abandoned traditional African views and adopted the views of the dominant Anglo-Saxon culture. While it is true that the BGLOs were social organizations that utilized some elements of traditional African culture and combined them with elements of European culture, that's the no-no right there. These organizations, in the end, use their power and influence to create a self-perpetuating black oligarchy. The Black Christian Church, like the BGLO, was also created from pre-existing white organizations and was then molded into an institution that catered to the needs of the black community. Whew. See, that's what you don't want. All right. So if you're thinking of organizing, creating organizations, you need to cut that from whole black cloth and not from white cloth. And these are the reasons why, being stated in these in this paper, both the Black Church and the Black Fraternity served a dual function within the African American community. Not only did these institutions create a safe haven for many within the community to challenge the laws of discrimination, but they were also seen as traditional institutions that were already accepted by white society. In his work, The Negro Church, W.E.B. Du Bois provides a rich social history of African American religious development. For many within the black community, the Black Church is not merely a house of prayer, nor solely a center for spiritual awakening, but a communal center for socializing and human bonding. Du Bois elaborates that the Negro Church is not simply an organism for the propagation of religion. It is the center of the social, intellectual, and religious life of an organized group of people. It provides social intercourse. It provides amusements of various kinds. It serves as a newspaper and intelligence bureau. It supplants the theater. It directs the picnic and excursion. It furnishes the music. It serves as a lyceum, library, and lecture bureau. It is, in fine, the central organ of the organized life of the American Negro. So I don't know if Du Bois understood this by the time of his death, but this is the problem with the church as well. Church doesn't do enough, or a lot of people point to its tax exempt status as to why. I'll admit that the church probably did a lot of good work at one time, but we've lost this now. I like how he calls gossiping the intelligence bureau too, by the way. The Christian church was a place where people could feel a sense of social solidarity, security, and communal refuge in an often hostile world. This insight is not limited to the black churches, but is common to other institutions within the black community. In this respect, both the black church and the black Greek-led organization became cultural incubators that at times served the black community as a means of connecting people and preserving cultural practices, but also grew to mirror the white community's preoccupations, prejudices, and desires. To this end, the black Greek-led organization became an oppressive organization that was used to suppress African-American agency and uphold the ideals of white supremacy. This adoption of Anglo-Saxon culture has created a disruption of traditional African culture and has perpetuated many of the myths and stereotypes that surround the black Greek-led organization. As such, many black Greek-led organizations have allowed for a falsification of their true consciousness. The stereotypical views embraced by these organizations have been influenced by racist philosophies and white supremacist attitudes. As a result, many black Greek-led organizations have adopted and embraced racist attitudes that stem from the oligarchy's willingness to gain social standing in white society. So that's the bottom line of these black so-called societies, right? At the end of the day, their core people, the leaders of these groups, right, are following a philosophy that they feel allows them to gain better social standing around white people. That one little thing to gain better social standing amongst white people is the bane of our existence right now, believe it or not. We have talented people who won't lift a finger to help in black society, right? To help build and enforce and strengthen black society, all because they want to gain standing in white society. As a means of gaining acceptance and social mobility, the black Greek-led organization attempted to emulate the attitudes, characteristics, and actions of the Anglo community. Thus, in order to acquire the needed access to the quote-unquote American dream, African Americans were often compelled to reflect the attitudes and philosophies of Anglo-American culture. By accepting the mannerisms and attitudes of Anglo culture, the black Greek-led organization also internalized the prejudices of this group. Although the black Greek-led organization provided its members with a safe haven to create oppositional cultural attitudes, these organizations often perpetuated the views of the elitist and privileged classes. Accordingly, the social access afforded to the members of black Greek organizations was not used for the advancement of the entire black community, but rather for the improvement of a small cohort of individuals. This view created a dichotomy within the black community where one group expressed cultural, economic, and social dominance over another and led to the establishment of class conflict. With greater access to resources and greater social mobility, the existence of an elite black class placed different elements of the black community in direct competition with one another. As such, African Americans living under the regime of white supremacy found themselves working in partnership with their oppressors to maintain the status quo in order to preserve their privileged status. Although this relationship enabled one group to have cultural dominance over another, nevertheless, all members of the black community found themselves firmly subjugated by those who controlled the resources of society. As a result of this, those who were members of the black Greek organizations had power and social clout within the black community, but were powerless within American society. And we see that all the time. Right? These guys will run and get the Jesse Jackson, still run and get Al Sharpton to tell black society how to look at something, how to vote, or how help them form Black society's opinion on something, right? What's the story of Sharpton, who's being paid? So I think it was what's that black guy's name? Byron Allen was trying to get his networks on cable providers, and they were shutting them out, and they got Sharpton to go out there and play interference and kind of sabotage Byron Island, if I remember correctly. You guys remember it better, you could state it down in the chat or down in the comment section, right? But in white society, Sharpton is a joke. He has no clout really in white society. When will we learn? When will we open our eyes and realize what's going on? And the bad thing about this too, I want to make sure I get this point out too. The bad thing about it is that you do need your talented people again in roles of leadership, leading this charge towards self-determination. You really do. No, not to sound snobbish or anything myself, but you can't have, like I live by a park. You have dusty dudes sitting around a park all day. They're not going to be the ones to lead anything. So you need your talented folks to lead stuff. And the problem with this Boule stuff is that now, that terminology has landed on the tongue of the grifters now. That anything you say, if you're an educated black person, you almost feel like you have to downplay being educated now. In fact, I saw someone, I won't say who, but I saw someone say the other day that they're not an academic when I know they are. But you cannot say to black folks now that you're an academic. And it's because of what the Boule has done in black society. So we're in this problem now. The point I'm getting at is that we're in this problem now that you're talented, right? And by the way, you're talented doesn't have to be college educated, of course. But oftentimes your talented are college educated. Or a large number of your talented will be college educated. That's just how it goes. Right? I can hear Mr. Untouchable rolling his eyes right now. No, I'm not saying that everything is about degrees, but I'm saying that oftentimes those things intersect. And because of it now, right, because of what the term Boule and all that has come to mean now, folks will reject you. You see? This is why it's coming to the point where you got to stop even saying that you're an educated Negro, an educated African. Because folks will reject you as soon as they hear it. And there's many reasons to reject quote-unquote educated Africans. Simply, and this is a topic for another day, simply because black folks in particular don't understand what smart really means. Black folks think smart means that you have a degree or that you do well in school, and that's not really what smart is. But that's something to talk about another time. So we have this conundrum upon a conundrum, because now if you're talented and you happen to have an education, folks will want to disregard what you have to say from jump. And it's because of these Negroes here in this paper, these Black Greek letter organization Negroes. This is the conundrum, It's like a couple of years ago, I remember, this is a few years back, I was doing a job search. And there was a time here where, in the 2000s, where folks with advanced degrees, black, white, in between, were not putting it on their resume. Because the jobs, just to get a job, just to have some money coming in, they were applying for jobs that were below the educational status, if you will. And they had to omit the fact that they had this higher education just to be able to get a job, just to be able to have some money and feed themselves, etc. Right? It's kind of getting that way in Black society now. Jay-Z had this song. I've talked about it a long time ago on this show. I always thought it was real disrespectful, but I kind of get it too, where he said he had to dumb down his lyrics. Right? I've since forgotten the line. I've been to dumb down the lyrics. And then he talked about Common, the rapper Common. And he made some nice little common sense thing in there. But basically he was saying that he had to dumb down his lyrics, because if he was to come out here, and this is back in the early 2000s, if he was to come out here on some kind of like smart shit, wouldn't sell. And this is the problem we have. Our talented now have to dumb it down. Imagine that. So, for you guys listening to me, how do you deal with that? How do you not come across as, how if you're a talented person, right? If you're a talented person and you have an education behind you, how do you dumb it down to be accepted, but still be smart enough to do what needs to be done? I'd like to hear from you guys to continue. Although the Black Greek-led organization did provide its members with a free space of Black creativity, these organizations used this safe haven as a means to perpetuate the views and attitudes of the Black cultural elite. As such, racist Moors were allowed to dominate, and white supremacist attitudes dictated much of the organization's actions. In this regard, the Black Greek-led organization remains sadly a group whose actions did not benefit the Black masses, but rather their own affiliates. Despite their use of elitism and snobbery, the popularity of the Black fraternity was furthered by both the exclusivity of these organizations and the notion that they helped to produce a better class of Black people. However, by limiting the access to these organizations to include only the Black upper class, the leadership of the Black Greek-led organizations ultimately failed to transform the Black fraternity into a revolutionary organization. How could it become a revolutionary organization? Look at its genesis. Look at where it comes from. How could it be revolutionary? It's built on a foundation of go along to get along, to be along with white folks. How could it be revolutionary? And because of that, how can the person who's an academic but is a revolutionary, how can they be of any use to us now? Enticed by the seduction of bourgeoisie attitudes and the hopes of full assimilation, the Black Greek-led organization became reactionary to white supremacy. Without the potential of the Black educated elite to introduce radical challenges to the structure of segregation and white supremacy, the status quo of inequality remained. As such, the contradiction of the Black Greek-led organization and their quest for elite status in the midst of group oppression remain an ongoing problem. Although Black Greek-led organization has served as a safe haven for Black thought and allowed for new attitudes regarding the future of the Black community, these organizations were conceived within Western culture, which over time reflected the views of a racist society and thus became a hindrance to the furtherance of the Black community. So that actually leads to another question. Can you build African-centered organizations in the West? That in some shape or form won't reflect some of the racist views of the Western society? In this respect, the Black Greek-led organization became a cultural incubator that mirrored the white community's preoccupations, prejudices, and desires. As a result, the Black Greek-led organization became an oppressive organization that was used to suppress African characteristics and uphold the ideals of white supremacy. This brings us to the declaration of conflicting interest. The author declared no potential conflicts of interest with respect to the research, authorship, and/or publication of this article. Right? So that's the paper. How do you guys feel about this reading? Did it shed any light on Black Greek-led organizations? Did it reinforce what you understood of those organizations? Do you see the conundrum now that we have if you're a smart Black person who happens to have received some university training or something like that? Do you see the problem that we have now? For those folks who may have been on the fence about that miscegenation stuff, who, folks who want to talk about, well, love is love and all this old shit. Do you see the problem with that? Do you see what the product of that causes for Black society? We saw this woman, Sage Steele, have you could tell she just has this disdain for her Black father. The only praise she gives him is for being a war vet or something like that, right? She's a mulatto. But the thing I take from this paper is that when we want to organize, we can organize. When we want to organize, we can organize. And hopefully you got that from the paper as well. When folks want to organize behind some bullshit about trying to be white, folks know how to organize. Folks know how to. So what are we going to do? In the words of the matron, what are you going to do? I want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. I want to remind you guys to, I won't play the whole spot, but I want to remind you guys to go to tshirtepiphanies.com. That's the merch store for KWAZ Radio. Go there and support the shows, right? You can support one of them or all of them, but go there and support the proceeds. This is important for me to put out there. The proceeds are not going to enrich the hosts of the shows. The proceeds go to improving their podcasts, right? And also, something, in the words of the matron, you should pay your thinkers too. Folks are taking the time to bring out these topics and flesh them out. Tip them for it. And you could, by supporting the merch, so you actually get something in return. You get a t-shirt or a hoodie or a mug or whatever it is you want, right? But the proceeds go to improving the shows. We're always doing research on how to expand the reach of the network, how to expand through various social media vehicles, like the Pro-Black Perspective did a Spaces the other day. We're trying to see how we can make that work for our podcast and stuff like that. So when you purchase a shirt, a mug, or whatever item from the merch store, you help us be able to put the time in to get this thing right. All right? So please do that, especially with the holidays coming up, Kwanzaa is coming up. Do that to help out the shows. And then, like I said, you get something in return. Well, thank you guys for tuning in with me tonight. I'll be back on Thursday. Thursday, we're going to have the discussion. Only 2 people really responded, so I guess it'll be me and 2 people. We're going to do the live stream discussion where we're going to do a wrap-up of the book Nation Building, which I read over the course of 12 weeks. We're going to discuss nation building. If you were taking notes during that time, it's imperative. Come on out, be there at the live stream with your questions and your comments, and let's flesh it out. Let's have a good discussion about the pros and the cons of the book Nation Building. I read it for you. All you have to do is write notes, bring your notes, and let's discuss it. We'll do that this Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then, of course, Saturday night is Shoot the Breeze. Join the Discord. The link is down in the description. It's pinned to the top of the chat. Join the Discord. There's books on the Discord, and We're always trying to add more features to the Discord. And you can also post your Shoot the Breeze topics on the Discord as well. Last thing I want to say, if you want to help KWAZ Radio expand, you don't only have to give money. I just want to be very clear about that. You could give your time too, and it'll be just as appreciated. If you know how to set up websites, WordPress plugins, and all that type of stuff, we could do with some help. If not, we're gonna have to ask for donations to be able to pay someone to do the work. But if you can do this kind of work and you want to give us a couple of hours a week for a few weeks to get this site up for KWAZ Radio, hit them an email, kwaz.radio@gmail.com. Let them know that you're here, willing and able to help. That's a big thing that we want to get going early in the new year, if not at the start of the new year. So if you have that expertise, let us know. Okay? If you're a graphic designer and you want to help with some graphics or something on the site, let us know. Okay? If not, you can donate to KWAZ Radio. You can donate to my show or the Pro Black Perspective or what have you. All right? Anyway, that's it for me. Until next time, guys, you guys be good. I'll see you on Thursday. Remember, we're discussing nation building. So you guys come on through. Let's talk about it. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.